I'm Kyle Natali from Mega Steakman, and I want to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how we made Gremlins in 60 seconds. CFox was holding our $10,000 one-minute movie contest. We learned about it pretty late, but you know what? I can't not enter, right? I mean, I love Gremlins. So if you want to learn how we took a 100-plus minute film, condensed it into 1 minute in pretty much a week, stay tuned. So the first part of this process is actually editorial. We have the finished film already, and we basically are trying to cut it down to its core elements, its essentials. What's the story about? What are the key beats that tell this story? And as you can see here, I've got a timeline. This is my initial selects of the Gremlin film. It's kind of weighted towards the end, because I feel like there's definitely a lot of setup and a lot of payoff. It all comes back at the second half. But I think, yeah, the major beats happen pretty much in the second half of the film. But you can see there's a pretty even distribution here. So as you can see, even being pretty ruthless in this initial draw, I basically am left with 5 minutes worth of footage, which is 4 minutes over the limit. So we had to, of course, be more selective. Here's actually a cut of what that would have looked like.
You know, there's some things I forgot to tell you guys. Keep them away from water. And probably the most important thing, don't ever feed him after midnight.
Here we go.
And instead, they pulled out my father.
They're inside.
All of them?
So if your air conditioner goes on the fritz, there just might be a gremlin in your house.
Now, as you can see, that's actually slightly over time, but I wasn't too nervous about it because I knew that we were going to condense actions on set. I didn't want to be fiddling with, basically this is throwaway work, this is pre-visualization. I didn't want to be too specific with it. But this gave us a very good blueprint of what we had to capture. So at this critical junction, while I was basically prepping assets, trying to get ready for the shoot, Nina Wilder from Laugh Wild Productions stepped in, saved the film, basically cast it, got costumes, props, production managed, was COVID safety, basically organized and directed the whole film while I was basically preparing assets. And thank you so much, Nina, for your incredible work on the film. You'll see some of her a little bit later on doing the motion capture as well. So what was that, a quintuple threat? Beyond quintuple. Incredible work. Leading into the shoot, what I like to do is prepare a visual shot list that kind of shows me what the lighting of the scene will look like, rough camera blocking, what's it going to look like. And from that point, we can basically make creative decisions. So also at this phase, because we were doing a green screen shoot, I really like to have the green screen sets prepped. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to do that. I was basically doing it after hours, after I got off work. I was doing blockouts in Unreal Engine, which I'll show you later on. But this is kind of what we had going in. A rough idea of what the lighting was going to be. Oh, there's a fire over here. Oh, there's sparks over here. Just kind of giving us an idea of where the light sources were coming from. Because when you're on that stage, there's nothing. I mean, we're not the Mandalorian. We don't have LED walls. That would have been sick. But we're just Gremlins. We don't have that kind of stuff. So on the shoot day, we basically did half the day at Shoreline Studios, which thank you so much to Shoreline for the amazing facility. One of the practical things for shooting a green screen is you can have multiple locations without having to move the crew, and it's just on a different place that people have to actually transport to. So there's just a practical nature of shooting the green screen. Same thing with how well, unfortunately, the Gremlins weren't real puppets. I know it's not in keeping with the original film. I love the puppets. I mean, who doesn't, right? That's like so much of the charm is the actual physicality of the puppets. But I think we got fairly close with technology as far as just telling the story goes. We moved on from that to a house, because most of the film takes place in Billy's house. And Robert Pang was generous enough to lend us the house for the evening, and it was really a wonderful location. I love the colors, like the wooden grain on the walls, like there's so much rich texture, and just dark walls are a cinematographer's best friend. I love dark walls. They basically prevents light from spilling around, bouncing everywhere. Makes it easier for you to make pools of light and just kind of more moody scenes, sculpt the light a little bit more. So the deadline was pretty rough. We learned about this contest a little bit late, so unfortunately we shot it on Saturday and it was due the next Friday before midnight. And when it comes to contests that are due on midnight, never post after midnight. So this was a huge challenge. Normally I have like 3-4 weeks leading up. So to cut corners, I made less assets. I was trying to look online, trying to kit bash things, and I made a few models for this. Let me show you my Gizmo. It's pretty sick. This is what the fur would look like, and how I applied the fur is I actually have this mat. So basically you can see this is where the fur would actually be growing, and it's a little bit thinner here because we want his skin to be showing. So let me undo. So you can basically see his skin underneath. And then I also have a mat for, this is the areas of the hair that are going to clump. So on the hair you can basically groom it with a brush. Let's turn back the hair. So I did a lot of brushing and like a lot of like very careful work with the brush on this, but it often works better if you set up a hair texture that has, let's go to clump. Clumping is going to be using this texture to actually determine where it's going to clump. So I basically made these kind of stripes. So you want to make it have a good variety. Also we have a hair frizz, same kind of principle. So I think that using all those mats with the hair texture gave a really good result for the final render. So the thing I learned the most about on this project, which has been very exciting for me, something I've been trying to do for years, is motion capture. And there's a few key pieces of technology that basically made this possible. So a few years ago, Apple bought this company called FaceShift, which does motion capture for the face. And that technology, of course, ended up in the Animojis, the kind of avatar facial expression capture device, whatever this is. But more importantly, this thing can read your face. There's 52 shapes that it will track, like raised eyebrows, eyes wide. It'll do individualized, like blinking, squinting, smile on both sides. It basically reads all those things on your face and will transmit that as raw data into Unity or Unreal, or as in my case, Animation Prep Studio's Luxor. So Animation Prep Studio Luxor was a godsend. I've been trying to develop some kind of Vive tracker motion capture solution for pretty much a year now. I'm not a programmer. I suck at this stuff. I bang my head like nearly every weekend trying to get it to work. But Grant has gotten this amazing solution up. So definitely check it out. Support Grant. This is a great project. As you can see here in Unity, you want to have the APS SDK installed. So that's this thing here. And to get that installed, you want to import a custom package, get this APS SDK, check out the Discord for information on how to obtain these things. So it's not going to actually do anything for me because I already have all the items imported. But let's actually bring in our Gizmo model. So I brought in our rigged Gizmo model and I just mocked up some quick textures, just the color channel. That's going to be important for us seeing the deformations on the character. When it's gray, it's harder to tell what's going on. So next we want to select our character in the project panel, not our scene view. We want to get the actual asset itself because that'll bring up this in the inspector. We want to go to the rig and make sure that it says humanoid and hit apply. If you don't hit apply, nothing will change. We also have to configure the model to make sure that the bones are correct. So in this avatar configuration, we're making sure that the names of the bones and like the locations of the bones match up. So hips, pelvis, different name, same kind of area. Got spine, chest, upper chest, that makes sense. Got the clav and upper arm, lower arm. So everything seems to be lining up here, which is great. Might as well actually check out all the different areas. We got neck, head, eyes, jaw. That's important for Luxor. So we have that definition set up, which is great. Hand, yeah, he doesn't have as many kind of points of articulation in the fingers, but this should be okay. Also, he doesn't have as many fingers, but I'm happy with this. I'm going to press done. So now that we have this model defined as a humanoid in Unity, we want to select this model, add a component, and type in APS for the Animation Prep Studio. So this is the SDK, and we have build avatar from FBX. So after this is done building, you'll notice a few things. One, the name is actually changed. So this is like this weird hash code that's kind of a unique ID for each avatar. And it's added in an armature linker. And some things are missing, so we need to add in one of these. So this is basically where our eyes are going to be. We don't want them to be in the model. Let's just make it so our eyes are kind of right here. Pretty ridiculous, but I love it. Going back to the main kind of root of our character, we'll also notice that it's asking for our face renderer, and this is for the blend shapes. And so those are on Gizmo body. I can show you the different blend shapes here. We got like the sneers and the squints and all those different shapes. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to drag in our body because that's basically the component that has our blend shapes on it. That's very important. All right. Just going to look through this list. It seems fine to me. Yep. And so another thing we want to do is look for the face cap linker. I'm going to add that because I do have blend shapes. Now, unfortunately, unless you name your blend shapes exactly the same, it won't get the mappings. Now we have to actually manually go through because some of the naming is just slightly different in my model. So here, nose, sneer, right? Yeah, it's this is the bane of my existence. Every time, every program kind of has a different naming convention. Unreal has a different naming convention. Facecap has it's all different. So good luck. So now after updating this facecap linker with all the blend shapes, I'm going to go back to our SDK, and this is important. You want to rebuild the avatar, because if you make any changes in the scene without rebuilding, all those are lost. So make sure you do that. So clicking here will bring up a folder with the avatar we just created. There's our Gizmo, and clicking here will bring up the Luxor kind of directory for all the avatars. So we want to make sure that we drag the one we just made into here. And so now we've got our Gizmo ready to be motion captured in Luxor. Well, we're all kitted out. We got our motion trackers on, Vive trackers. Okay, let's take a look at how things work a little bit in Luxor. I'm going to choose a tracker for my head. Let's open up this little hamburger menu. So there's a few things we have to do. We have to do a tracker setup. Looks like it remembers my foot. Sometimes the best way to actually determine what tracker is what is actually just shake it on your body. That's that, that's that. So all the red ones are not connected. So I'm just going through and we already are getting some results here. So after setting up all the trackers, you open up the VR menu. That's where you get access to all your avatars. And we want the Gizmo we just set up. Activate it. But now the most important part of motion capture is the T-pose. Oh, there it is. So this is the dream. This is it. Now, how impressive is this? This is how easy it is. It's incredible. Yeah, you can look at yourself. So like I can see if I put my hands here, definitely clipping through my head. So I kind of want to like avoid, this is my head. So like putting your hands on your head is really tough. And let's record a take. So let's go into controls.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start.
So now we're recording a take live. I have my body, I got my fingers, I got my face, and also my voice is being recorded. And for once in my life, look at me. Look at me, I'm cute. This is incredible. I'm just gonna go into export and going to call this one Gizmo test and build scene. And now we have this Blender file. Let's just open it up. So then it brings up this scene. You have to hit run script. Okay, here we are. So it starts with the T-pose and then it goes into my animation. And if you want to just get it out to another program, just export as an FBX. So I made an FBX preset that has all my proper settings. I think the most important one is to only have the deform bones. I don't like these things. I feel strongly about leaf bones. We're puppeting a character live and we're doing it on a computer that you can buy at like Best Buy. Like it's crazy, right? So now I'm going to show you how to apply a clip from Luxor to our render ready character. So Nina, the director, did the motion capture. This was an amazing scene. I'm actually going to shrink it down so that our character matches. So making sure that the two rigs are equally scaled is important for retargeting. I'll show you a little bit more about that later, but for now, let's start using our character definition tag. So this is new in Cinema 4D R23. So what the character definition tag does is it uses the names of bones to determine what body part that is. We can add body parts, and best of all, we can load presets. So I made one using the Unreal Engine skeleton, and this is just the strings that I'm using on my naming convention. Now why that's cool is we can go into rigging, use the character definition tag, open the manager, and because it's the same bones, we can load that same preset. Also included in R23 is this character solver tag, and this is what's going to do the retargeting. So we're going to tell it to put the motion onto our target character, and the motion is going to come from this character. So let's scrub forward, and there it goes. But you'll notice that there's an offset. Now, why is there an offset? That's because this solver tag only uses rotations, it doesn't use position data. So we do have root motion on this character. Root motion being a translation of one of the bones, most of the time the pelvis. That's a really easy fix though, especially because we have a T-pose on frame 1. So I'm going to show you how to deal with that. We want to open up our render ready character. Just going to go into rigging tags, constraint, position scale rotation tag. You want to make sure you maintain original because I find sometimes the bones come back with different orientations. Just click maintain original. That will solve a lot of your problems in this process. I'm going to drag in the new pelvis. That's the character we just imported, remember? And if I scrub forward, perfectly lined up. But one problem, besides this being nightmarish, is there's no blend shapes. You can see the blend shapes on the imported model, but not on ours. So that has to be done more manually. There is no retargeting, like there's no tag for blend shapes. So I'm using Espresso for that. So what we have in this setup is one pose morph tag, which is undefined right now, being remapped to our render ready character. This part is really painless. You just drag that on. Once you set this whole system up, it's as easy as just dragging the tag onto the input here. And now we have those blend shapes on our character. So at this point, you could actually select your character. This is the one that we want to render on, and we could actually bake those keyframes. Or we could even do those modifications straight on the character. For instance, let's just open up our root here. So as you can see, there's a ton of keyframes involved with motion capture. So one easy way to deal with it is actually just focus on the one body part at a time. Let's actually just look at one rotation at a time, actually. Just gonna frame this up. And Cinema 4D has this feature called Reduced Modification Modes. So this mode gives us a very simple F-curve that we can actually modify to get very, very large adjustments on while keeping the little fine detail. You can see that the actual motion capture data with all the peaks and valleys is staying the same, but I'm just kind of pushing that around using these F-curves. So that's a really easy way to, say, prevent clipping, or if you just want to do like a very general change to the motion capture. So I also found another interesting way of animating on top of motion capture. So I'm going to convert this joint into just a null. So this is the thigh. It's in the exact same position as you see. And I'm going to use that rigging tag. Remember the one, the position scale rotation. And I'm just going to drag in this here. So now that basically kills all the motion on it, right? I can turn it down and then we get the motion capture data back. So if you need to, you can just basically override the motion capture for a moment. But what's interesting is you can also go like say 50%. And now if I adjust this, we still get a little bit of the old data, but it's in a new position. So I found that very useful. So also saving the day, I got some incredible motion capture from Jimmy's Screamer Claws, and this stuff was so cool. The thing is, I had the most janky ass way of retargeting it to my character. I'm going to go through that process right now. I exported the raw mocap from IClone as an FBX. I imported that data into Cinema 4D alongside the T-pose FBX. So then I used the old retarget tags and a constraint tag to take that T-pose, and I keyframed the motion capture data, the first frame of Jimmy's motion capture data, to be in a T-pose. That's important so that both characters are basically starting off at a T-pose reference. I imported my gremlin model, scaled it so that the pelvis was the same height as the character, and then I used the character definition tag to retarget the data, and I constraint tagged the hips to match. So the reason why I scaled up the gremlin to the hip height of the other character is I'm constraining the gremlin's hips to the other character's hips. So the floor to hip distance should be roughly the same on both the characters, and so that should minimize foot sliding. Obviously the rigs are different, so there still was foot sliding, but having that would minimize it. Then I baked the data from the iClone to the gremlin, so I had to bake all those keyframes. Then I deleted all the iClone assets. Then I scaled the gremlin back down to its original size. So that process probably took me like 30 to 40 minutes, just with all the baking and retargeting. Like, it was just basically a custom setup for each character. The new character definition tag is one of the coolest additions to Cinema 4D, and I love it. I love the simplicity of it, and that made this process a little bit less painful, but... So now, of course, this comes with the problem is you have to sculpt 52 blend shapes onto your characters, and that's where I have a secret weapon called Face It. So Face It is a Blender plugin, and God, this thing is incredible. Buy this plugin, it's so good. So here we are in Blender. You're gonna wanna choose your main mesh that you're gonna wanna put the blend shapes on. Press N to bring up your little menu with all your plugins. I'm gonna do Face It over here. We're gonna register the face object, and let's register some secondary objects. I think we're also gonna use the eyeball. So let's just register that. And probably the mouth. Yeah, let's go in there. Okay, so now we wants us to switch over into, if you press tab, you can edit the actual polygons and verts. It took me the longest time to figure that out in Blender. All right, so I'm gonna choose that. Oh, actually we choose one eyeball at a time. So this one's the left eyeball. Yeah, this one is the right eyeball. So once you've kind of defined where the eyeball and teeth are, let's generate some landmarks. So first, this brings up this little face that you want to bring to the chin. And then you want to... See, the thing is, our model is going to be so wildly different. But I mostly want to line up the eyes. And something like that. Okay, now obviously this needs a lot of work. I'm going to try to move these landmarks. It was expecting a very human face, and we have a very not human face. So there is documentation on where these points should be, but... I'm just trying to do it by memory because I want to go fast here. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and project the landmarks. So now, as you can see, we're in a side view. I'm just going to kind of set up these as close as we can. Like for instance, you saw when we projected this, it's not in the corner of the eye at all. So we just kind of want to line up all these shapes. Okay, so I think this is all I can kind of glean from this angle. So I'm going to hold down Alt, click and drag, and actually kind of orbit around and trying to find problem areas. I kind of want these to be following the topology a little bit better. For instance here, this looks a little bit off to me. I like to keep the mouth as even as possible, so I'm just going to kind of back this up. And I want these two to kind of line up vertically. Now I'm going to press tab again. I don't know why. And I'm going to generate rig. Alright, so here we have a look at what those shapes are going to be deforming. It hasn't bound itself to the mesh yet, so we have to press bind here. So after binding, you can see when I scrub through, there's our blend shapes. I'm probably actually going to kill all the data on the eyes. I don't want blend shapes for the eyes. I'm going to be using the bone rotation. But hey, it's there. So now on the Bake tab, we can actually make these actual blend shapes. So we can change the naming to be either face cap or AR kit. I actually prefer the AR kit native because that's what Unreal Engine uses. But anyways, we'll just bake all those down into blend shapes. You can see this one's not quite right, but you know, just a little bit of sculpting, fix it up, make the blinks. I think blinks are the hardest ones to get because, well, the character's eyes are so weird. But pretty much everything else is just by taste. You can push the expressions a little bit more. Yeah, and then you're ready to go. I would have lost probably a day and a half like sculpting these things myself. I've done this before on characters, just like eyeballing it, and it's really hard. Particularly the mouth close expression, one of the hardest shapes. Like, what is this? What is this even? Anyways, this saved me a ton of time, particularly for my next model, this Gremlin. So I really wanted to sculpt the Gremlin myself because that's a dream project, right? Sculpting a Gremlin, but I didn't have time for that, and luckily I found a really great model by RG Villacorta. I mean, the fidelity on this model is fantastic. The thing is, it doesn't look like Stripe or some of the more traditional Gremlins. It's a really cool, unique design, but I really wanted Stripe to look like Stripe because Stripe's one of my favorite villains in the movie. So what I did is I took the base mesh, I moved the verts around, I basically thinned them out, made them more angular and scary, replaced the mouth, replaced the teeth, replaced the eyes, added a mohawk, took them into Substance Painter, did a new paint job on them. Now this is where the Face It plugin really came in handy because I had to sculpt the blend shapes on it too, right? Because obviously we're gonna be driving this one as a puppet. I got really good results from that plugin, and then I took those and then I basically sculpted a little bit more expression onto them. So you can see some of the smiles and smirks really push the face around in a really fun way. So they're pretty expressive. So I'm really proud of how this turned out, but unfortunately it took around a day and a half, maybe even 2 days of my 7-day production time. So I knew I had to make up for that time other places, particularly in rendering, and that's where Unreal Engine came in. So working with Unreal Engine is incredible. And if you're a filmmaker and you're not using Unreal Engine, then you're probably not a 3D artist. But if you are a 3D artist, you got to use Unreal. It's one of those generational leaps and bounds. If you remember back in the day when I was using CPU rendering, I'd get like an hour a frame, maybe 2 hours a frame. I'd have 3 or 4 computers all rendering a different scene, just praying that nothing was wrong. And then of course Octane came along, GPU rendering, and that was really cool because you could see what you're doing. You could see what the shot was going to look like roughly before you pressed render. And now that's the scene. Like you see what it looks like before you go to the render queue. And the render speeds are like insane. Like Octane would maybe be at worst 20 minutes a frame. I think all this stuff like Gizmo was like 10 minutes a frame at most, if it was like a close-up. But now, like, I was rendering out 500 frames in 40 minutes. Like, just if someone could break that down in the comments for me, that's insane compared to like an hour a frame. Like, you just get so much more work done and you don't have to worry about the render time afterwards. In fact, this is pretty crazy. So the day that this was due, I didn't have any cameras locked for the downtown stuff. And that's like 4 or 5 shots. So the morning of, I basically blocked out the cameras. Oh, this camera goes here, this camera goes here, put in my gremlins, animated my lights. It was just like insane that I was doing camera block out the day that this was due, rendered it all on time. I actually rendered it twice that day because who cares? Like, it was just so fast. Had it comped and ready to go by midnight. Like, that would have scared the hell out of me a few weeks ago. One of the key assets from the film was this Downtown West set from Pure Polygons. This was actually made free, I think, either a week before or the week of the contest deadline. I probably spent around a day just gutting it out, making it the street layout that I wanted, something that matched the film a little bit better, all ending with the cinema. I took some Megascan assets of like some snowy areas. I made my own snowy assets. I learned how to make like a custom shader that would blend the edges of the terrain as it like sunk into the ground, which is a dream come true, like smoothing over your clipping. That's so cool. So I've like dabbled in Unreal, but this is like the first time I like really used it for production, and it was so intuitive. Like certain things like Alembics, just importing that, the playback was very intuitive. I was like, oh, you just drag it in there and okay, I have to make a track for it. Oh, I have to run that track. And like the sequencer was so powerful. I was surprised, like, look at this theater scene. I can't believe it handled all those gremlins without crashing. I'm sure I could have thrown in even more, but I just got tired of placing all these gremlins around. The new render queue is super cool. Like, instead of rendering out shots like we're used to, you can render out sequences because, I mean, the render times are negligible. Like, why not just render out like a full sequence of multiple things with render passes? The depth pass it gives you is pretty crazy. To use it, I basically took into After Effects, really adjusted the curves and then used a black and white filter because I noticed that like, oh, it's using 2 channels, one for like the foreground, one for the background, like after this like clipping plane that it kind of set up in the middle. So if you don't have one, get an Epic Games account, go to the asset store, get the free stuff for the month, shop around, find really cool stuff. Chainsaw attacks. But yeah, it was a crazy process. Late at night, Corey would do matte paintings for me. He did the sound design. He actually did one of the comp shots. He did this clock, like all just last minute. Like up until 12, we were just throwing in as much stuff as we could. We put in the score that Ivan gave me a few days ago. It's incredible how he was able to make this whole piece cohesive, because normally when you're cutting these things, they're so fast. There's a lot of tonal whiplash, but he made the whole piece work. Thing is, I only had like 5 or 10 minutes to mix things. You can see my automation at the bottom there. It's pretty terrible. I kind of got scared. I didn't do my color grade. Like, I was saving the very end to do the color grade. I just didn't get it done. But you know what? It's fine. It's there. The film is done. It's uploaded before the deadline, and that's what's important. So that's how we created Gremlins in 60 seconds. Thank you so much for joining us on this behind the scenes look at the crazy process, which spanned multiple programs and multiple crazy nights. Lots of help from friends. If you have any questions about how this stuff works, I don't know, but I can try to help you out in the comments. There's so much to know with Unreal Engine. Also Animation Prep Studio, I feel like I get much better data next time, but just, it's a process. Like learning all this stuff, you just have to do it. Try it out. I mean, just have fun with it. Unreal Engine in particular, very, very fun. So if you have any questions, again, let me know in the comments, and I hope you have a good day. Take care.
Mega Steak Man.